The electric car feels like the future. Quiet, clean, a little bit inevitable, the thing that's finally arriving after a century of gasoline. Here's the thing, that's not quite what happened. Because America already had electric cars, not in a lab, not as a prototype on the streets, in real numbers, parked outside real houses. In the year 1900, the electric car wasn't the future, it was the present, and within 20 years, it was gone. The strangest part isn't that it died, it's what killed it. The fatal blow came from an electric motor. The story most of us carry is simple. The car was invented, it ran on gasoline, and electric cars are a recent idea, something that started with the Prius, or Tesla. Or maybe a documentary you half remember about General Motors crushing its electric cars in the early 2000s. In that version, gasoline won because gasoline was obviously better. More powerful, longer range, the natural choice. The electric car is the underdog finally getting its turn, 100 years late. It's a clean story, it's also wrong about where it starts. Go back to the turn of the 20th century and look at what Americans were actually driving. According to United States Census figures, for 1900, of the cars built in the country that year, about 1,600 were steam-powered, around 1,500 were electric, and only about 900 ran on gasoline. Read that again. The gasoline car, the one that supposedly won on merit, was in last place, steam-led. Electric was right behind, and the loud, smelly, hand-cranked gasoline engine was the niche option nobody was sure about. So the real question isn't why electric cars are finally arriving, it's why they left. To understand what happened, you have to understand why people loved electric cars in 1900, because the reasons are almost exactly the reasons people love them today. They were quiet, they were clean, no smoke, no oil, no noise, and above all, they were easy to start. You simply turned them on. The gasoline car had a problem that's hard to imagine now. To start it, you had to hand crank the engine. You stood at the front of the car and turned a heavy metal crank with your arm. And if the engine kicked back, the crank spun backward with enormous force. It broke wrists. It broke arms. It occasionally killed people. The hand crank was dangerous enough that it made the gasoline car genuinely unattractive, especially, at the time, to many women, who often preferred the electric for exactly this reason. So in 1900, the electric car had the cleaner technology, the easier operation, and a real share of the market. What it didn't have was cheap energy and cheap manufacturing, and both of those arrived, almost at once, for the other side. In January of 1901, a drilling crew in Texas struck oil at a place called Spindletop. It was a gusher unlike anything seen before, and it helped turn petroleum from a scarce product into a flood. Gasoline, once an afterthought, became abundant and cheap. Then came the factory. In 1908, Henry Ford introduced the Model T at $850, and his assembly line kept driving the price down to around $360 by 1916. An electric roadster, by comparison, could cost $1,750 in 1912. The gasoline car wasn't just winning on fuel, it was now a fraction of the price. The electric car still had one thing going for it. The gasoline car still had to be hand-cranked. That was the last real advantage, and in 1912, it vanished. Here is the irony at the center of this whole story. In 1911, an engineer named Charles Kettering patented an electric self-starter, a small electric motor that cranked the gasoline engine for you at the push of a button. In 1912, Cadillac put it in a production car. No more hand crank, no more broken wrists. Think about what that did. The electric car's biggest selling point was that you didn't have to crank it. Kettering's invention gave that exact convenience to the gasoline car, using a small electric motor to do it. An electric motor erased the electric car's last advantage. After that, the math was brutal and one-sided. The gasoline car was now easy to start, cheap to buy, cheap to fuel, and it could drive as far as the roads went. The electric car was expensive, slow, and tied to a battery that couldn't go far, and to electricity, which much of rural America didn't even have yet. By the early 1920s, the electric car was effectively gone from the mass market. Now, there's a version of this story that gets told as a conspiracy that a patent was used to strangle the electric car. The truth is stranger, and it's worth getting right. There was a patent fight, and it ran the other way. A company called the Electric Vehicle Company had been the largest electric car maker in America, running fleets of electric taxicabs. As its electric business collapsed, its managers got hold of a broad patent, the Selden patent, that claimed rights over the gasoline automobile. And they tried to charge every gasoline car maker a royalty of 5%. The biggest electric car company in the country spent its final years trying to tax gasoline cars. Henry Ford fought the patent in court and won. In 1911, the Electric Vehicle Company had already gone bankrupt in 1907. So no villain strangled the electric car. What killed it was cheaper energy, cheaper manufacturing, and one well-timed invention, none of which required a conspiracy. The market simply forked. And we've spent a century treating the path it took as the only one that was ever possible. This is why the electric car doesn't feel like a return. It feels like an arrival. We forgot it was ever here. And that forgetting matters, because it shapes how we see the present. When you believe gasoline won because it was simply permanently better, the last 100 years of oil look inevitable, just the way things had to be. When you know that electric cars once led, and lost on price and timing and a single invention, the whole thing looks like what it actually was. A choice between two roads, decided by a handful of years. Look at what decides the electric car's fate today. The price of batteries, the range, the cost of gasoline, the charging infrastructure. They are almost exactly the same three forces that decided it in 1912. Energy, price, and infrastructure. The technology is new. The contest is identical. History doesn't repeat, but this one rhymes so closely it's almost uncomfortable. The electric car was never a glimpse of the future. It was a piece of the past that lost a close race, and then got erased from the story so thoroughly that its return looks like an invention. Maybe that's the quietest lesson here. The best version of something doesn't always win. Sometimes it just waits 100 years for the numbers to change. So the next time something looks inevitable, it's worth asking one quiet question. Did it win because it was better, or because, for a little while, it was cheaper? This is Unwritten, and there's always more to the story.